In this episode, we are looking at one of the most practical hardware choices a beginner technician will face, because storage decisions affect how fast a system feels, how much data it can hold, how much it costs, and how likely it is to stay dependable over time. A lot of new learners hear hard disk drive, HDD, and solid-state drive, SSD, and assume the newer option must always be the correct answer in every case. That is not how real support works. The better choice depends on what the computer is used for, how much storage space is needed, what kind of performance the user expects, and how much money is available for the upgrade or purchase. Once you understand the strengths and weaknesses of each type, along with the idea of form factor, speed, endurance, and reliability, the decision becomes much less about hype and much more about matching the storage device to the actual job. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is part of our companion study series. The first book is a detailed study guide that explains the exam and helps you prepare for it with confidence. The second is a Kindle-only ebook with 1,000 flashcards you can use on your mobile device or Kindle for quick review. You can find both at Cyber.News in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A good first step is to remember what storage is doing in a computer in the first place. Storage is the long-term home for the operating system, applications, documents, photos, videos, and everything else the user wants to keep after the computer is turned off. That makes it very different from memory, because memory is temporary workspace while storage is the place where the system keeps the things it must remember. When users complain that a computer feels slow, the storage device may be part of the reason, but storage is also about more than speed. The technician has to think about capacity, how long the device is likely to last, how much physical space it takes up in the system, and what kind of workload it will face each day. That is why storage planning is not just a shopping choice. It is part of understanding how the user actually works and what kind of balance matters most in that particular machine. An HDD is the older and more traditional kind of storage device, and beginners usually understand it best when they picture it as a device with spinning internal platters and a moving read and write mechanism. Because it relies on moving parts, an HDD behaves differently from modern solid-state storage in several important ways. It can offer a lot of capacity for a relatively low cost, which is one reason it remains useful even though newer options exist. It is often a smart choice when the user needs to store large amounts of data such as video files, photo archives, backups, or collections of documents and does not need the fastest possible system response. At the same time, the moving parts inside mean that an HDD is more sensitive to physical shock, usually slower to access data, and more likely to create mechanical noise than a solid-state option. That does not make it bad. It just means it fits certain jobs better than others. An SSD stores data electronically instead of relying on spinning parts, and that one difference explains a lot of why users often notice such a strong improvement when switching from an HDD. Because there is no spinning platter and no moving read and write head, the system can reach data much more quickly in many everyday situations. That usually makes startup times shorter, programs open faster, and the whole computer feel more responsive when the user clicks, signs in, searches, or switches between tasks. An SSD is also quieter and usually uses less power than an HDD, which can be especially helpful in laptops where battery life and heat matter. For beginners, the key lesson is that an SSD does not just improve one small benchmark number. It often changes how the machine feels in ordinary use. That is why users so often describe an SSD upgrade as making an older computer feel new again, even when the processor and memory stayed the same. Form factor matters because storage devices do not all come in the same physical shape, and a perfectly good drive can still be the wrong choice if it does not fit the system. Traditional HDD units are often found in 3.5-inch sizes for desktops and 2.5-inch sizes for laptops and some compact systems. SSD units can also come in a 2.5-inch form that fits into places where older drives used to sit, which is one reason they are so popular for upgrades. At the same time, many modern SSD designs use smaller board-like shapes that connect directly to the motherboard instead of living in a drive bay. For beginners, the important point is that storage planning always has a physical side and a logical side. The device has to fit in the available space, match the connector or slot, and still be supported by the system. If a user buys a fast new drive that does not physically fit the machine or cannot be mounted properly, the performance advantage will not matter because the upgrade failed before the computer ever had a chance to use it. Speed differences are one of the biggest reasons people compare HDD and SSD storage so often, but it helps to describe those differences in very plain terms. An HDD usually feels slower because it has to wait for internal mechanical motion before the correct data can be reached. An SSD feels faster because it can reach stored data without those same delays from moving parts. That difference shows up in real ways users can feel, such as startup time, login time, application launch speed, file searches, and how long the system spends waiting when several tasks happen close together. A beginner technician should remember that users do not usually say my storage access time is too high. They say the computer drags, takes forever to start, freezes when opening programs, or feels old. Those are the kinds of complaints that should make storage type part of your thinking, especially if the machine still uses an HDD as its main drive. One of the most visible places storage speed matters is in the operating system experience itself. If the main system drive is an HDD, the computer may take much longer to start, install updates, open large applications, or recover from multitasking than the user expects. With an SSD, those same actions often feel faster and smoother because the system can reach many small pieces of data more quickly. This matters because users judge the whole computer by how it feels in daily use, not by how it performs in a perfect empty test. A beginner should understand that the system drive has an outsized effect on the user experience. Even a computer with a decent processor and enough memory can feel frustrating if the main storage is slow, while a modest system often becomes much more pleasant to use when the operating system and everyday applications live on an SSD instead. That is why storage choice is often one of the highest impact decisions in entry-level support and upgrade work. Cost and capacity are where the decision becomes more balanced, because the fastest choice is not always the smartest choice if the user needs a lot of space on a limited budget. An HDD usually gives much more storage capacity for the money, which is why it still has a strong place in data-heavy situations. If a user needs several terabytes of space for video files, large media collections, archives, or backup copies, buying that much space in SSD form may cost more than the situation really justifies. On the other hand, a user with moderate storage needs may benefit much more from the speed of an SSD than from the extra capacity of a large HDD that they will never come close to filling. For beginners, the key question is not which type is best in the abstract. The better question is how much space the user truly needs and how much value they will get from faster response compared with lower cost per gigabyte. That thinking leads to smarter choices than simply buying the biggest or newest thing available. Endurance is another topic that sounds complex at first, but the beginner version is fairly simple. Endurance is about how much write activity a storage device can handle over time before wear becomes a serious concern. With an HDD, wear is often thought about in terms of moving parts, age, shock, and mechanical stress. With an SSD, endurance is more closely tied to the way the storage cells are used and rewritten over time. That does not mean an SSD wears out quickly in normal use. In fact, for many everyday users, a good SSD can provide years of useful service without endurance becoming a major problem. The important beginner point is that endurance matters most when the workload is heavy and constant, such as repeated large writes, frequent editing of large files, or environments that push storage hard all day. A typical school, office, or home machine may never come close to stressing a quality SSD in the way some people fear when they first hear that flash storage has finite write life. Reliability needs a careful explanation because beginners often hear simple statements that one type always lasts longer than the other, and real life is not that neat. An HDD has moving parts, which means it is more vulnerable to drops, vibration, or from mechanical motion, and certain kinds of age-related failure. An SSD has no moving parts, which often makes it better at handling normal movement and better suited for laptops that get carried around often. At the same time, either type can fail, and failure does not always announce itself in the same way. An HDD may start making unusual noises, slow down, or produce more obvious warning signs before complete failure. An SSD may stay quiet, and fast until a more sudden problem appears. For a beginner technician, the lesson is not to trust any storage device forever just because it is new or quiet. The smarter habit is to match the drive to the workload, understand the likely failure style, and remember that backups matter no matter which storage type the user prefers. Noise, heat, and power use also affect storage decisions, especially in laptops and quiet workspaces. An HDD often makes audible spinning or clicking sounds, and while that is normal to a point, some users dislike it, especially in quiet home or office environments. It also usually uses more power than an SSD and can create more heat during operation, which matters in small laptops where battery life and thermal control are already limited. An SSD is typically silent and more efficient, which makes it a very attractive choice for portable systems and machines where quiet operation matters. For beginners, this is a good reminder that storage choice affects more than just file speed. It also affects how warm the machine feels, how long a battery may last, and how much mechanical noise the user hears during ordinary work. Those details may sound small at first, but users notice them every day and often describe the whole computer as better simply because it feels cooler, quieter, and quicker after the storage choice improves. Use case trade-offs become much easier when you think about the user's actual pattern of work instead of treating storage as one-size-fits-all. A basic office laptop used for email, web browsing, video meetings, and documents usually benefits strongly from an SSD because the user will feel the speed improvement all day long. A family desktop used to store a huge library of videos, photos, and backups may still benefit from an HDD for bulk storage because capacity matters more there than top speed. A gaming system often benefits from an SSD for the operating system and frequently played titles because load times and general system feel matter. But the user may still add a large HDD for older or less used files. A beginner technician should learn that mixed storage strategies are common for a reason. Many good systems use a smaller, faster drive for the main working environment and a larger, slower drive for mass storage. That is not compromise in a bad sense. It is often a smart balance of speed, space, and cost. The right storage choice also depends on whether the technician is solving a problem or planning a new build or upgrade. If a user says the computer feels painfully slow but does not need much space, moving from an HDD to an SSD may create the biggest improvement for the money. If the user says the machine is constantly out of room but already feels responsive enough, adding capacity may matter more than chasing even more speed. If the system is a laptop that gets moved every day, the physical toughness and lower power use of an SSD become even more attractive. If the system is mainly a backup target or archive box that holds large amounts of data and is rarely used interactively, an HDD may still be a sensible answer. For beginners, this is a very important mindset. The storage decision should start with the user's problem and not with whatever type of drive happens to be most talked about at the moment. Another useful habit is to separate performance needs from storage needs, because users sometimes mix them together. Someone may ask for the biggest drive when what they really mean is they want the computer to stop feeling slow. Another user may ask for the fastest drive when what they really need is a lot more room for photos, videos, or project files. A technician who listens carefully can help them make a better decision by asking what runs out first in real life, speed, or space. This keeps the conversation grounded in actual experience instead of product labels. A smaller SSD may be a poor choice if it fills up immediately, and a giant HDD may be a poor choice if the user spends every day waiting on a sluggish operating system. Good support means matching the drive to the main pain point, and sometimes that means explaining that the best storage choice solves a real problem instead of simply sounding impressive. The main lesson from this topic is that HDD and SSD storage each have real strengths, and the right answer depends on what the system must do every day. HDD storage usually gives more capacity for less money and remains useful for large, less speed-sensitive data needs. SSD storage usually gives a much faster and smoother user experience, uses less power, and works very well as a main system drive, especially in laptops and everyday office machines. Form factor decides whether the drive fits, speed affects how the machine feels, endurance matters more in heavier write workloads, and reliability depends on both design and how the device is used. When you put all of that together, storage choice becomes much easier. You stop asking which type is better in general and start asking which type is better for this user, this machine, this budget, and this job. And that is exactly how a technician should think.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.